Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Donnell. I'm the Manager of Support Services here at All-Trans-Tech. I'm happy to have the opportunity to introduce this afternoon's webcast on loading authority. This webinar will discuss the transition of loading authority over from OT-5 to OT-57. This presentation today is going to be done by Matt Johnson. Matt is the Vice President of Client Services at All-Trans-Tech. Matt has worked in the rail industry for 23 years and has been with All-Trans-Tech for 17. Matt is an active member of the OT-57 tag and is the current chairperson of the OT-57 project team. And before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. All-Trans-Tech is one of North America's largest railcar management consulting companies. We provide fleet management, technical services, and market insight to a variety of railcar owners, shippers, as well as repair facilities. All right, now we're going to structure this presentation within approximately 45 minutes of content, followed by 15 minutes of question and answer. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the question pane, which should be on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar window. We will work through the questions through the Q&A period. In the event that there is a question that we currently can't answer due to OT-57 still being in development or for any other reasons, we'll be posting these questions and answers at www.alltranstech.com/OT-57. Again, that's www.alltranstech.com/OT-57. The webinar replay, as well as other helpful information, will be posted there shortly after the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I'm happy to introduce Matt Johnson.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Give us just a moment. We're doing a quick audio check, and it looks like everything's okay. So, all right, we have a lot to cover this afternoon. So you noticed already we're flipping through the slides pretty quick, and we're probably going to have a number of people still joining a little bit late. But to put everyone's mind at ease, as Chris mentioned, this presentation in all its forms will be available through our website, alltranstech.com/OT-57. We're going to have a lot of materials there that you'll see in this presentation. The presentation itself is a PDF file, and the video, once we're finished producing it after the fact, it needs to be compiled and such, but that will be posted as well. So we're hoping that this will be a valuable resource to a number of people. It's only going to be available for a temporary time, and we'll talk more about that later. Today, I'm going to cover the past, a brief history on how we got to where we are. The present, which is looking at where we're at with development of the OT-57 application and the plan moving forward, as well as the future, inclusive primarily of future phases of development and new functionality that will be implemented. Resources, as mentioned, we'll be talking about that and the web page that both Chris and I referenced, and then we'll get to some question and answers. So we want to leave some time for those of you interested who have questions that I didn't address throughout to be able to voice those questions, and feel free to do that at any time. You don't necessarily have to wait for the Q&A period. That block on the GoToWebinar window, just go ahead and put it in there, and we'll try to, we'll address them at the end, but we'll collect them throughout. Time permitting, so I am going to try to move fairly quickly through this. The intent is to do a live demo, and by live, it's in a test system. It's not actually in production, but we'd like to walk through it and just again give a feel of the flow. Most of what I'm doing is going to be based off of screenshots for now because it is in development and it is subject to some change even while we're talking here. So, and then there'll be a few closing comments at the end. I do want to kind of have a disclaimer up front. The presentation starts out a little bit text heavy. I'm not a big fan of doing a lot of reading in a presentation. A lot of you are capable of reading on your own given the material, but we will be getting into a lot of visuals. So this is going to be kind of a mixed bag of a presentation. So again, thanks for joining, and here we go. We're going to start with the past. So a brief history, how we got to where we are. And leading off OT-5. So everyone thinks of OT-5 as a system or a process or a rule. OT-5 is a circular that defines the requirements for submitting and maintaining loading authority on rail cars. Compliance with OT-5 requirements has been an ongoing problem for shippers for several years, and while some investments have been made to improve the system, The problems have seemingly grown as enforcement and implementation of commercially driven fines have been implemented by numerous railroads. This became such a problem that in 2018, the North America Freight Car Association, also known as NAFTA, reached out to the Association of American Railroads, AAR, to discuss some potential solutions. Real quick, NAFTA, for those that aren't aware, was organized back in 1994, and it's dedicated to promoting the safe, efficient, and economical ownership and use of private rail cars. It strives to ensure that its members and all private car owners and operators are subject to reasonable, equitable, and lawful practices and rules affecting the use, repair, and principles of compensation for private rail cars. NAFTA's goal is to protect the interests of manufacturers, owners, and non-road operators of private rail cars, and is currently made up of 39 members who collectively own or operate in excess of 754,000 rail cars, which is inclusive of rail car manufacturers, rail car owners and lessors, shippers who own and or lease rail cars, as well as associate members. Their website is nafcahq.com. And again, I bring this up because they really were the ones to champion this initiative and bring it to the attention of the AAR, which sparked this whole opportunity for tremendous improvement for all of us. In the past, OT-5 had a lot of problems. And in fact, by the past, we really are referring to today's environment yet. The loading authority process and application suffered from trying to do too much and from usability issues. A lot of times what we have in the rail industry is something that works very well, and people say, well, let's just attach this to it. And there's a lot of unforeseen consequences. So in this case, the scope, there was assurance that UMLR is accurate and up to date. We were talking about in OT-5 capturing load and route information. We're capturing adequate storage information. I put adequate in quotes because that's been interpreted differently by different parties and enforced differently. As well as updating contact information, who to reach, and control of the cars, and assurance that the cars are free of maintenance advisories. So some of the problems with this, while definitely well-meaning, and there were worthwhile things to do, combining them into the one application was problematic. The majority of the tank cars in North America are owned by leasing companies. So restrictions on OT-5 filing based on either UMLR or maintenance advisory concerns was really outside the shipper's ability to rectify. They don't have access to either one of those to address them adequately. So in which case the lessor would have to be engaged to correct the problems, and that introduced delays into the filing process. So the shipper or their agent would go in, try to file, they'd run into a problem, they'd have to reach out to lessor would have to do something to correct it, come back to the party doing the filing, and so forth, and this would slow things up. This became especially problematic once enforcement was being done by the railroads, and they would the OT-5 filing would be rejected, and then if that car shipped while the controlling entity reached out to the lessor and everything was being handled, all of a sudden that car was subject to fines. So UMLR and maintenance advisory issues also both have other channels through which they can be enforced. So their inclusion in the OT-5 process is not necessary. A lot of things have been evolving in the industry, and there's other ways to handle these. So making OT-5 be the channel for it is not necessarily appropriate anymore. Storage requirements also, as I mentioned, were interpreted and enforced inconsistently. There were some railroads that would, as long as a storage location was listed, that was fine. Others would actually mandate that there was a spot at the facility for every car listed. So if you had 5,000 cars, that storage facility had to have capacity for 5,000 of your cars. In addition to the requirements, the platform itself had complications. So it had the loading of data was time consuming. It wasn't a terrible interface. It got better over time, but it still was time consuming. The loaded data was extremely repetitive. Everything you put in for one fleet, you'd have to re-enter for every other fleet that had similar data. So if I use the same storage location for multiple fleets, I would have to re-enter that data over and over. Same goes for contact information. The handling of changes is complicated. So moving cars between OT-5 filings, in and out of fleets, between owners and so forth is difficult. And the approval criteria and timing by the railroads isn't consistent. While some railroads will turn around a response within a day, others would take weeks, if not months. And when the same filing would require approval by multiple railroads, this left the filing as a whole subject to problems. 2 out of 3 roads might approve it right away, but if the third one 2 months down the line decides to reject it, there would be conflicts and timing issues and things that had to be resolved that were challenging, which has timing being problematic. So the AAR, fortunately, was extremely receptive to NAFCA's request to have this conversation, and the Joint Committee was formed. The TAG consists largely of representatives from member companies of NAFCA, as well as several railroads, in addition to employees of RailLink, NAFCA, and AAR themselves. It was clear that all the parties at the table were extremely interested in a better solution. And the leading question really was, what is the issue that the railroads need to have resolved? Some of the people at the table said, can we just get rid of OT-5 altogether and just be done with this? Others said, we have problems that need to be addressed, and so we can't get rid of it. So getting to the root of what was actually necessary was all up to the top. And fortunately, everyone had this as a big priority to get done. So the number one things that the railroads need is a way to reach the appropriate party when a rail car is placed but not accepted. So an example of this, a rail car does an empty return trip, but it's not the responsibility of the loading facility that it returned to. So as an example, a gas station or frac stand facilities, you will have this, where the party responsible for the controlling car sends it out to be loaded by another party and then consumes the commodity. So most common is a situation where I have possession of a car. I either own it, net lease it, full service lease it, whatever. I have possession of a car, I load it, and I ship it out elsewhere to be emptied, and it returns empty to me. But in these scenarios, what happens is I'm in possession of the car, but I'm sending it to someone else to have it filled. They put commodity in it, I bring it back, I consume the commodity, and then if it empty returns to the loading facility, and they are saying, hey, it's not my car, hey, I'm not ready for it, whatever, it ends up getting stuck and bottlenecking the railroads. So when this happens, what the railroads need is a way to reach the right contacts for placement instructions. And if that can't be done, then they need a place to put the car, because they need to get out of the way. It's definitely causing problems with how they facilitate movements on their rails. Everyone agreed that expediting a solution was necessary and worked to conduct follow-up meetings quickly. I should say that these meetings really kicked off at the very end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So a tremendous amount of effort was put forth this year by everyone involved, and a lot of emphasis was put on getting the solution in place in 2019. So first, the current process was reviewed, OT-5, and then a new process was discussed and proposed, including timelines. So there are a number of meetings talk about how can we achieve what needs to be achieved here. From there, a circular OT-5 revision was drafted, and a proposed OT-57 circular was drafted. And in addition, a project team was established to actually handle the development. So the programming itself was done by RailLink, but a number of companies participated on that project team to work together from design to testing and so forth. The project team meets on a weekly basis and has also had several face-to-face meetings advancing the development of the application. So a little bit about RailLink. RailLink is focused on creating value for the rail system. Their systems have been an integral part of the North American rail industry for almost 40 years. Beginning as an information technology department within the AAR, RailLink evolved to meet the dynamic information needs of the railroad industry. The company was established as a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary of the AAR back in 1999. And today, their applications and services are embedded in critical operations and financial systems throughout the industry, and they support railroads, equipment owners, and rail industry suppliers along every link of the supply chain. They deliver more than 9 million messages each day over their EDI network, including transportation waybills, advanced train consists, blocking requests and responses, and trip plans. And most of you on this call are more likely than not familiar with RailLink. However, we do come across it from time to time, people that aren't more directly engaged, and they hear the name but don't realize who RailLink is. In this case, I really, really have to give a lot of credit and thanks to the primary team there. Jim Pinson, Mark Aldendorfer, and Katie Cunningham have been absolutely wonderful to work with. They've been very receptive to the needs. They really paid attention to the requirements and the desires of the group, and they've executed just flawlessly. They've moved things along, and they've just done a great job with this. So my hat is absolutely off to them. So that really brings us to where we are right now, the present. Look at the OT-57 application, and we're also going to get into how you can get started. Many of you likely have been getting some, probably if not many, notifications, both RailLink, Alltrans Tech, other third parties, leasing companies. There have been a number of efforts to get the word out to make sure people are aware that this is coming. And so we're going to give you some insight into what this is. At this time, the OT-57 application is in its second round of UAT, which is user acceptance testing. It's moving along pretty quickly and may really have a lot there. The end of the year is coming up quick and so much to do. The OT-57 application will be part of the RailLink suite of tools available through their website at www.raillink.com. The application is scheduled to be completed and moved to production in December of 2019, with a start date of January 1st, 2020, when the revised circular OT-5 and the new circular OT-57 are planned to be published. OT-5 itself, as a system, will be deactivated on February 3rd, 2020, so approximately a month after the application OT-57 becomes available. Both these dates are subject to change, but we expect that it'll be very close to these as proposed, and it will provide, as mentioned, about a month for the users to transition data to the new system. So January 1st is, of course, New Year's Day. There may be a little bit of flavor on that. February 3rd is the first Monday in February, but these aren't written in stone, but we do expect everything to be on or right around these dates. The circular letter OT-5 has, as mentioned, has been revised to take out some of the system references, and OT-57 has been drafted. These are kind of pending and, as mentioned, should go into play at about January 1st. For those interested, don't try reading them on your screen here. These will be available on our website on the alltranstech.com/OT-57. So we'll have materials like this available, and you're free to look at them. So the premise of the system, the new system, OT-57, is very simple. The controlling entity, CE, will be responsible for maintaining rail cars through fleet profiles. So what does that mean? The CE can also be the car mark owner, a lessee, or a designated agent. So if I own the rail car, I am both the car mark owner as well as the controlling entity. But if I'm leasing the car from a leasing company, that leasing company is the car mark owner, and I'm the controlling entity. In this case, for myself, as an employee of Alltrans Tech, we are frequently the designated agent for the controlling entity. So they might be leasing the car or own the car, but in either case, we will be the agent maintaining this. The fleet profile itself will consist of just a few simple elements. Very clean, very easy. It'll be your fleet name, which will be at the discretion of the controlling entity. It'll need primary and secondary contacts. It will require a primary storage location with secondary storage locations optional. And of course, it will need to be linked to rail cars. So kind of wrapping a visual around that, what we're saying is that to create a fleet, it's going to consist of basically three things other than its own name. It's going to need contacts, which will be derived from Find Us Rail, storage locations, which will be derived from OT-57, I should say created and stored in OT-57, and then rail cars, which will come from UMLR. So there's some very nice integration with the Find Us Rail and UMLR applications that RailLink also houses that are going to make this run very smoothly, very easily. If the fleet is set up with legitimate values in these three components, it will automatically be approved. So for anyone who has to deal with OT-5s themselves, this is very exciting news. As I mentioned, the whole process with OT-5s, where you have to go to the railroads and you have the back and forth with approval and rejection and so forth, none of that happens here. It's not up to the discretion of anyone individually or any company. Basically, if the legitimate values are entered into the system, it will be approved, and you will know immediately. You can't save and leave it without it being good. So what do we mean by legitimate values? The contacts are linked, as I mentioned, to the fleet profile from Find Us Rail. So inherently, if you have a contact in Find Us Rail, that can't be messed up. You'll link it to here, and if that contact changes, the link will change. I'll get more into that shortly. Storage profiles are going to have to be present, and they're going to consist of a handful of validated elements. So for each storage facility, you are going to need the following. You need the name of the facility, which is at your discretion. You can call it whatever you want. The delivering carrier, so which rail is heading there. You'll need the FSAC, which is the Freight Station Accounting Code. And you'll need the SPLC, Specific Point Location Code. And you'll need the CIF, the Customer Information File. Now, a lot of companies, or especially the people in these roles, may not have as much visibility or knowledge about some of these things. The FSAC, SPLC, and CIF might not be as familiar to some as it is to others. And RailLink has built a very nice lookup tool into the interface that we'll be showing you. So you'll be able to see how this will be used. More information, by the way, on the CIF numbers is available on RailLink's site. And again, don't worry about writing this all down too quickly. The presentation will be available on our site, so you can glean it from there later. Lastly, for legitimate values, the rail cars themselves must exist in UMLR, and they must be either active or pre-registered. So that's it. As long as the car is active or pre-registered in UMLR, it will be accepted. So who wants to see what it looks like? Your lines are all muted, so I can't hear you cheering, but I know you are. So let's get to it. Quick disclaimer, as I mentioned before, the system is still in development, so what you're about to see is subject to change. However, the overall look and feel and workflow will remain the same. So there may be some differences as we go, but as of last night, this is what it looked like. Okay, where to start? So Find Us Rail. In order to get access to OT-57, as is the case with most RailLink applications, you'll have to be set up in Find Us Rail. And to get there, you have the launch pad. This is a clip of the RailLink website highlighting the Find Us Rail page. When you click on it, you'll go in and you can do a quick, easy search. Oh, by the way, sorry, I forgot to mention, this is a notice that has been sent out by RailLink. As I mentioned, many of you may have already seen this. If not, this also will be posted to our website. It has some information about controlling entities being registered in Find Us Rail. So I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of this detail. The document will be available on our site, so you're free to pull it there. If you have questions as well, do feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. So once going into Find Us Rail, what I've done here is there's a contacts item in the menu. All I did was I searched for users at All-Trans-Tech, and I located my own account. When I clicked on the account, it brought me in. At the bottom, in that little yellow button that says Edit, I clicked there so I could add a category to myself. When I did this, I selected Loading Authority, OT-57. The category role there is Primary. And then the category functions are either Controlling Entity, Equipment Owner, or Railroad. So as I mentioned, in this case, All-Trans-Tech does not own any equipment. We don't own a railcar market that's in use. So I have clicked the Controlling Entity button. The equipment owner would be tied into this process if the controlling entity isn't doing their job and they're needed. And the railroad is going to have a very different view on this. Maintaining the fleets and all the other information is done by the car owner or controller. The railroads are going to be able to need a way to grab that contact and storage information when a car runs into that scenario that we mentioned where they need to be able to place it. Back on the launch pad, because that's all I need to do in Find Us Rail. Once I've saved and locked in that information, the Loading Authority application is available to me. I can click on it, and I'm presented with the dashboard. Now, one of the things, this dashboard is still in work. This is kind of in draft. There's going to be more here. There will be more information. This is not a finished page at this point, but it is still the first page that will come up. In the top left, is a fleet option, and so I started with Create Fleet. There's a lot here. I realize it's a little bit small. I'm going to zoom in on some things and highlight some things, and again, you'll have more visibility to this. I couldn't really do much to shrink it down and zoom in on parts and still communicate the point effectively, so I apologize for the fact that it's a little bit tight. First thing I did, I created my fleet name and fleet description. So that first one, I've got 50 characters to give it whatever name I want. In this case, I just called it Commodity X Service. The fleet description, I called it Railcars Shipping Commodity X out of Downers Grove, which is where our office is here. We aren't actually shipping anything, of course, but for the example, this serves nicely. You're seeing right under that a couple names. You're seeing Burnaby Allison and Jonathan Matthew. Those are coming up as contacts because they're tied to the company that I'm already logged in as, but I'll come right back to that. After I've saved those two, I do need to select one of those contacts as my primary. So the radio button on the far right is for the primary contact. You click the one of who the primary contact will be. You have to have one. You can only have one. If you select another radio button, it will deselect the first one. But you can add as many secondary contacts as you want. And you can do that just by clicking anywhere on the line for that person's name. So when I do that here, it'll highlight Allison Burnaby, and you can do that to as many as you have. If I had a dozen people up here, I could make them all my secondary contact. Or I can pick and choose who I want it to be. But the primary is going to be involved directly up front. I can also add additional people to this who aren't in my company. So what I've done here is I entered RAIL under that Enter Company ID field, and when I did that, it brought up two additional people that were in the system. These are the OT-57 contacts at RailLink. I've got Katie Cunningham and Mark Aldendorfer, and I could add them as well. So this will be useful if you're setting up the controlling entity contact information for another company. In our case, as AllTransTech is a third party, we might make a secondary contact someone at our client's company. Or conversely, they might make us their primary or secondary contact. It depends on who's managing this. You're seeing there's the two additional people that were added. And then next, so that's it. That is it for contact. That is all I need to do. If there's a contact with my company that's not in this list, it's because they're not specified as an OT-57 user in Find Us Rail. So all I would have to do is go back to Find Us Rail, add them. Let's just say Christinell, who led us into this meeting today. I could go in there, create Christinell's record, or if it already exists, I can just edit it, add OT-57 loading authority, and he would show up in this list. Very, very, very easy. Storage locations. Clicking Manage Locations, it's going to bring me to the Manage Storage Locations screen, which I could also do right from the top at any point in time. That's one of the top menu items. I've got a couple generic storage locations here, storage location 1, storage location 2. I'm going to click over on the top right and say create storage location. It adds that block to the bottom. And I just add a few things. I put in a location name of my own choosing. I just called this one Downers Grove. And when I click the magnifying glass there that I have the arrow pointing at under delivering carrier, it brought up this little window. I can do a lookup. I put in BNSF. Now, if I had something a little bit less descript, or if I had something that was just vague, I could also put a name. I click search, and when I do that, I get a search menu. So BNSF was fairly specific, so I only got one option. And when I did it, I can just click that little arrow button, and it'll add them back to my page. So you're seeing down in the bottom left there, it's added BNSF. It's a little hard to see, it's shaded out, but it just populated there. Next, I clicked the magnifying glass and the FSAC. It brought up the window that you're seeing in the middle of the screen. I put in BNSF, and then I also selected that I wanted this to be in Illinois, and then I hit search. When I did that, I got the search window, and here are all the different locations I can pick meeting those criteria, where BNSF is the handler, and it's in Illinois. Right near the top here, I've got the record for Downers Grove, which is, as I mentioned, that's where I would want to create this for the storage facility to be at. I selected here, and you're going to see it did two things for me. One, it populated the FSAC, but it also populated the SPLIC. So this is really, really a nice little tool. When you populate these, it will pull up the additional values automatically for you when it can derive them itself. So the only other thing we need to get then is the CIF. Click that magnifying glass, get this pop-up. What I did here is I entered in customer name AllTransTech and hit search. I can enter a bunch of things. If I know the CIF, I can enter it directly, but I can put in a bunch of other criteria, hit search, and there I go. I've got 3 different AllTransTech locations listed. I want to grab the last one that's in Downers Grove, and there we have it. It's populated the CIF number into the system right there. So RailLink has worked to really make this as easy as possible. Even if you don't know the codes, I did not know the FSAC, I did not know the SPLIC, but it was very easy for me to go in, look this stuff up, populate it, and done. Once I have these, I can click Save Location in the bottom right. I get a success message up in the top of the screen saying, hey, you've done it, congratulations, and then it is an available location for me to use on any of my fleets. So, going back over to the fleet screen, you can see now in storage locations, I've got my primary, which I checked. It works exactly as the contacts do. And then I've also selected a secondary. And this is to my benefit because if, for whatever reason, the primary facility, if I get to the point where the railroad has tried to reach me and I haven't responded and they're going to move the car, well, I want them to move it to my storage facility. But if my primary facility is presenting a problem, it's full, it's far away, whatever, the secondary is also available to the railroads, and that might be a better option. So I don't have to select secondary locations, but generally it's not a bad idea. That's it. If you've done everything up to this point, once you save it, that you've set up that fleet profile. Now we still need to add cars, which I'll come back to, but that is the profile is basically it. There is a final section on this page for the alternate empty waybill instructions. This section is completely optional right now. We're looking at probably phase 3, this being something that actually can be leveraged. So again, if there's an empty waybill instruction, this is a different direction that may be able to be given to the railroads. It is not going to be used up front. It can certainly be populated. The only reason it was developed at this point was simply because it was easier to do it now while the screen was under construction than to look at going back and doing it later. Once I have this, I can save and continue, and that will bring me to my Add Equipment screen. So you're seeing the little green tag up in the top right again, success, my fleet was saved. Again, I'm sorry, this is all pretty small, but again, you will be able to see these in the presentation. You'll be able to pull down if you can't see them very well on your screen. On the Add Equipment screen, I can do 2 things. This is incredibly robust. One, I can download the template. Also, you'll notice there's a little button, a little slide switch above that arrow that where it says switch to text input. I could turn it off of an upload function and do it to where I type in or copy and paste in directly some text. I'll come back to that. The download template itself will give me a CSV file that looks like this when opened in Excel. And what we've done here is we populate just with some dummy cars. So I've got all these records. I loaded, it was in the realm of, I want to say about 2,000 cars here. And just through kind of a general standard upload, that will go into the system. So you can load the cars in all kinds of formats, including ranges. So if I'm loading a list through a file, I do need to list car by car by car. But it's pretty flexible with number of characters, leading zeros, non-leading zeros, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is if you're entering the cars as text, so if I had toggled to the text option, I could put in load AARX 1-1000. And any cars in that range would be pulled into it automatically. I could also list the cars. I could list specific cars. I can use commas. I can do a lot of different ways to do this. So if you're copying and pasting values out of different places, you're not going to have to worry about doing a lot of formatting to get that data into the load, which is really, really nice. I really appreciate that Railink put some extra effort into getting that kind of ability to decipher what's being loaded. People can load some crazy stuff, and they've accounted for a lot of it. Things like capitalization, spaces, as I mentioned, leading zeros, that's all accounted for. So you don't have to worry about that. Also, you can load, get this, up to 50,000 cars at a time. So unlike OT-5, we're limited to, I believe it's 500. And that, again, is another one of the problems. It creates a lot of redundant work and time. You can load 50,000 cars at once here in this system, all to a single fleet. The testing that they're doing right now, Railink's reported back that this will process internally in about a minute. So, 50,000 cars in a minute, that is a really, really nice trade-off. We don't know exactly what kind of performance we'll see in production outside of Railink, but I'm excited that we can do this kind of volume. This is really, really helpful. Like I mentioned, once you have the file created, you click Select File, and you get the standard navigate to your file, select it, pull it in, and once you upload it, you're going to get this little success message. So that green section at the top says, Equipment Add Completed. Here's a summary of the results. So valid, I have 1,608 cars, but then I also have 335 cars not numbered, 39 cars in conflict on another fleet, 27 cars in conflict on my own fleet, and 13 cars that are invalid equipment. I can also from here click to download a CSV file with the results. This is the only time that you can download this result file because it's immediately after I did the load. If I come back to this fleet later, I can't get that result file again in the same way. However, I will show you that you can still get a lot of this data. The result file itself looks like this. You get a CSV. I've done a little highlighting. I have to highlight some of the things. These cars are all, just in a test system. So, if you see your mark there, don't worry about it. This is just dummy data. What you're seeing, though, is conflict on own fleet. I'll talk about what that means in a moment. You're also seeing that, loaded it was valid, it was invalid, or maybe not an UMLR. So a handful of different things that can happen here. So, like I said, what are we talking about? If it's valid, clearly the car was successfully added to the fleet. Everything went as expected. It is done. You're good to go. If it says not an UMLR, again, the car has to be either active or pre-registered for it to work in unload the load. If it's in conflict on another fleet, what that means is the car is linked to a fleet under a different controlling entity. So another company has already registered that car in OT-57. I can't remove it from their fleet. Most likely this is going to happen where a car comes off lease with company A, it goes on lease with company B, and company A hasn't released it yet. So this is telling me, hey, someone else still has this. Might be right, might be wrong, but I can't add it until it's rectified. Conflict on own fleet is where this car exists in another fleet, but it is under my control. So I have fleets 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm adding cars to fleet 5 and it says, whoa, this car is still in fleet 1. Invalid cars are in UMLR, but I don't have access to them. I can't do anything with a railroad or a TTX car. So we've got that message. We also then have this in a handful of menus at the bottom. So we've got one menu where it has equipment not UMLR. Here's the same things that I just had in that CSV file. If I zoom in, it's going to be a little bit grainy, but you'll see it. I can get to all the different cars, and I can copy and paste them right out of here, no matter how long this list might be. Here I've got 335 cars. I can highlight them. It scrolls up and down, and then I can copy them into another list if I didn't grab that CSV file previously. You're seeing two buttons in the lower right. The first one is a delete button with a trash can. What I can do is say, you know what, these were wrong. These cars aren't in UMLR, they're the wrong cars, I don't want to do them, whatever. If I hit that button, it removes them from this list, they're gone. However, if the cars are correct, but they're not in UMLR yet for whatever reason, maybe I did this before the build is done and the cars have been registered or whatever, but I do expect they'll show up, I can come back in here at any time and hit that recycle button and it will test them again. So let's just say the first car, AARX 002530, was added to UMLR after I did this load. I come back in, I hit that blue button, that car gets removed from the equipment not UMLR list and gets added to my active fleet list. I can come back in here as much as I want as cars are added to UMLR, hit that button, and just keep getting them moved over. That isn't something that will be triggered automatically, at least at this time, but it is a really nice, easy way to keep that alive. The next section is going to be the equipment on another fleet. So, as I mentioned, this is where it's on someone else's control. I can copy and paste them, and again, I can handle this the same way as the UMLR. I can either say, nope, dump them all, I'm going to start over, or I can say recycle. As company A releases the cars and they become available, I can go in here, I hit recycle, and if they are now free to grab, it will automatically add them to my list. I have to hit the button to do it, so it's not inherently automatic, but it's automatic once I hit the button. The last section is equipment already assigned. And again, this means in my own fleet. So here it's telling me there's the car and there's the fleet it's in. In this case, these all happen to be in fleet number 1 that I created, which is a dummy fleet. In this case, I can grab any of them individually that I want. So I can click over here in this checkbox and I can do one of two things. Or I can also click select all at the top. I can click select all. If I hit the garbage can here, it will remove any of them from the list that I had checked. If I hit the move arrow, it will pull them out of All Trans Tech fleet number 1 and put them into the fleet that I'm working on right now. So this, again, is really nice. It's an easy way to free up, move a car from one fleet to another, give it a different profile, and just manipulate things on your own end without having to close out one and open another and create new or all that other kind of stuff. And you can move cars in and out of the fleet at any time. So further down on the screen, after we've already gotten some of this squared away, you'll see the equipment listing at the bottom. And there I have my list of the 1,608 cars. And I can do a couple things. One, the cars are there. I can scroll through them. I can copy paste them. If I copy paste, even though they're kind of showing up in a table-like format, they will copy and paste into a column very nicely if you do it into like Notepad or Excel. I can add equipment, like I mentioned, at any point in time. No refiling, no resetting the fleet profile, any of that. Just click Add Equipment, add the cars. If they don't fall into any of the failure categories, they'll be added right in. If they do fall into a failure category, just like I showed you a moment ago, another fleet, whatever, you can address those as they're corrected. I can also remove equipment from the list, so I can copy and paste out of this list, or if I have an Excel file or whatever, it's the same as loading equipment. I can go in and just say, if I said remove ACFX 27610-68965, then all the cars in that first row of my example would be removed from this fleet. I can also replace all, which kind of is just a way to save a step. If instead of trying to synchronize this with another system all the time and saying, what do I need to add, what do I need to remove, I could just come in here with a fresh list whenever I want, and it will automatically delete all the cars that are associated to this fleet and add the ones you're adding then. So you don't have to go through multiple steps. It's a nice all-in-one kind of stage. And then, of course, I can also download the equipment CSV, so I can pull all this into a nice little file. That's going to be helpful for comparing it to any other kind of external system to make sure that you have everything lined up appropriately. There's some stuff in phase one that I'm not able to demonstrate yet. Some of this is in, but I'm not able to really demonstrate it here. One is the full equipment search. The equipment search screen is being built yet, and it's not ready for display. But similar to the equipment load, I can put in a lot of different things. I can put in ranges, cars, everything else. It's very, very flexible, and it will give me a list of everything that I have access to as a controlling entity, and it will show me what fleets they're in. So again, this is going to be very helpful for making sure that I've captured everything appropriately. The equipment search screen, again, I can't use it, but we kind of have mock-up. There's where I can enter in the equipment IDs. And in this example, I have like a car, comma, car, comma, car. I can also do something where I just have a list. Usually they look very different, but the interface deciphers it, and it works beautifully. I also, at this point, searches will be able to be done by car mark. So you'll be able to go in and just say ABCD, and it will show you everything there that you would have access to. The car owner's ability to override a car's fleet assignment. So what we're talking about here is, again, lessee A has released the car, lessee B has picked it up. The leasing company could have lessee A release it. Now, most often, of course, the leasing companies are going to want lessee A to do that. That's typically going to be part of the agreement, or it's just good housekeeping. They should do that. But if they don't, the lessee will have the ability to override it and get it out of their fleet. Also, the ability to switch the company view is something I'm not really able to demonstrate here, but I can show it to you. Up in the top right, you see M. Johnson C007. C007 is my company code. By clicking there, since we act as an agent for a lot of other companies, I'll get a pop-up and I can enter in a different company mark. I have to be designated as the contact by that company in Find Us Rail to do this. So I can't just go out and connect to anyone. But that makes it nice and easy for anyone acting as an agent or managing any other fleets. Very easy to switch around between them. Any profile information that I have set up as one company is not available to the other companies, as it should be. Those should be partitioned. So this works very nicely. Full equipment search, I didn't mention, by the way, that would be done primarily by the car owners as well as the railroads. So I'm going to come back to that in just a quick second. The car owner ability to override a fleet assignment, the ability to switch company view, and then railroad ability to pull data. So the railroads are going to need to be able to access what is the contact information. And if I can't get that contact to respond with where I should put the car, then where am I going to put it in terms of storage? So I'm not able to really demonstrate that, and RailLink is doing some work to set up a way for the railroads to be able to connect and pull that data as needed. One of the requirements is that the railroads will have to be in possession of the car at the time it's being requested, and that is still in development, so there's nothing to show just yet. As I noted previously, part of getting started, OT-57 will be in production by January 1st. Excuse me, at that time, the controlling entities will have about a month to configure their fleets and the fleet assignments before 57 becomes mandatory, around the 3rd. Because the setup is completely different, data from OT-5 will not transfer over to OT-57. So that's really important. You can't assume that just because I've got the car registered in OT-5, it's going to migrate over. It won't. That's going to have to be an effort by someone on your behalf. The key here is to ensure that the controlling entities or their agents are appropriately set up with OT-57 access and Find Us Rail. Again, you'll have that letter on the site. If you haven't received it already, that's going to give some instruction on that. One of the things that's a good idea here is that while you do not want to mess around with the Find Us Rail contact, if you set up a contact with a group email account, that is not a bad idea. Let's just say you have, in our case, OT-57@alltranstech.com. I could set that up as either an account that multiple people have access to, or I could set it up as kind of a router, so when an email comes into it, it goes to multiple people. And that is a really good way to make sure that things don't get missed, especially if one of those people isn't in the office on the day that we need to address something. Controlling entities or their agents should also start drafting fleet profile information. So we recommend that you start to collect the information needed, the fleets, the contacts, storage locations, fleet grouping. You can be doing this on paper, Excel, whatever. It's a good idea to start thinking about how you're going to want to set this stuff up and start drafting it. Then when the system becomes available, it's going to be kind of plug and chug. It should be nice and easy. Fleet groupings, by the way, a lot of times what we're thinking is we're going to see things by commodity service, maybe by geographic location, possibly by the service representative. A lot of different ways. Or you can do it all in one big fleet. What it's going to come down to is what contact is going to be leveraged and what storage facility. So you may or may not want your entire fleet to have one storage facility default assigned to it. While this process is simple, the strategy and coordination might take some time, so a few other additional notes. OT-57, first of all, is a last resort. This is to be used when the railroads can't get a hold, or so they know who to get a hold of when a car is non-constructively placed. They have to get a hold of someone. If they can't, they have to know where to put it. If they can't do that, then it's going to go to whoever they want to be subject to other tariffs and whatnot. One of the things that might be a good idea is to set up a default fleet. So if you start up front, actually maybe even call it default, load all your cars into it. One storage facility or maybe a few, get your contacts squared away, and then you can move all the cars out of it as you configure the additional fleets. So this is going to make sure that you're compliant and you have something in there and they're able to get a hold of you if needed. It might not be the ideal contact, it might not be the ideal storage facility, but it's something so that you're compliant until you can get the other fleets set up, which you would still want to do as soon as possible. You don't want for the railroads to not be able to get a hold of the right person, and you definitely don't want them to send the car to the wrong place because that's going to be subject to charge. Where we're going with this. So the future, phase 2 and phase 3 over the next 2 years. Phase 2 is a handful of proposed updates that we're looking at, some periodic contact verification. So if I have an individual and Find Us Rail, they're linked to a fleet, and that person is no longer with my company, I need a way to make sure that that gets captured. So we're looking at on some maybe every 6 months or something like that, a notification will go out from the system to that contact saying, hey, are you still there? And if they don't reply, it may throw the fleet into conflict, start notifying the owner, and kind of trying to ramp things up to get it addressed. There would be an enhanced ability to pull and synchronize data. So we're looking at more download functions and so forth, and a way to better audit against your own fleet to make sure you have things in the right place and that everything is covered. Coordination with Find Us Rail is also going to be captured to capture removed or updated contacts. So if a contact is moved or changed in Find Us Rail, so let's just say I did assign Chris Donnell as one of my points of contact, and then I removed Chris Donnell in Find Us Rail as an OT-57 loading authority individual, then OT-57 itself would come back and say, hey, you've got a contact reference here who is no longer part of Find Us Rail in this capacity. Automate the owner ability to delete equipment. So again, this is something where we want to make this streamlined, make it move quicker and easier, as well as facilitate moving equipment between two controlling entities. Again, lessee A, lessee B, make it a little bit easier. Maybe lessee B will go in and say, hey, I've got these cars now, please ping lessee A to release them. Lessee A would get a message, they could go in and say, yep, release them, and they'd automatically shift over. So there would be no downtime between filings. It would just go straight from one to the other. I don't know exactly how that's going to work yet. It's still in discussion, but this is the kind of thing we're looking at for phase 2. In addition to an enhanced ability for the railroads to pull relevant data. So this is all in place for the railroads to be able to meet a need that they have in moving your cars. So we're looking at doing more and more to make this something just to make it easier for them to get what they need out of it. And in addition, we're looking at automated communication between the railroads and the contact. So what is that going to look like? There's a specific timeline defined for addressing a problem car through OT-57. On day 0, and I'm going to run through these pretty quick. These are all in the documentation that you'll get. So railroad will provide notice to the controlling entity that the empty disposition is needed. There will be 2 days, starting in total the next day, for the controlling entity to respond. On the second day, the railroad will repeat the notice and also copy in the car mark owner if it's not the controlling entity. And then on day 3, the controlling entity and the car mark owner will have another business day to respond. Day 4, if empty disposition is not received, there's going to be a 24-hour final notice before it's moved to the stored location on file. If not, then it'll be, let's see, here we go. If it cannot be sent, the railroad tariffs publications policies shall govern. So that's covered here in a little bit of a table. This is in the OT-57 draft that will be on the site, as well as everything I just had up there. So all those steps and the days. What this is kind of illustrating is how it will make exceptions for weekends and a few holidays. There's probably going to be about 4 holidays that will be standardized into this. That is yet to be determined. Phase 3 is still a conceptual discussion. Implementation of the alternate empty waybill instructions that we touched on earlier, implementation of that, including things like possible pools, transportation codes, reverse routing rules. There's a number of things being talked about. It's important that the purpose of OT-57 isn't lost here and that this doesn't add unnecessary weight to it, but there's some really good ideas on how we can make it easier and less likely that cars will end up in the wrong place. We're also looking at potential for some storage location verification. We do need to make sure that these places really exist. If you're sending your cars over to like the Railway Museum or something like that, that's just not cool. And we're looking at some GUI interfaces to continue to make things easier to use as people get into it and we start to get more feedback. Resources, as I mentioned, we have a website. There's a number of companies that are working alone and in conjunction with RailLink to ensure that communication is all done here and timely and consistently. alltranstech.com/OT-57. You may have heard about it. We've been talking about it several times here. We're going to have a lot of stuff posted there. The letters, white paper that was drafted to NAFCA, et cetera. This presentation itself will be available through its documents, presentation, Q&A. So the Q&A that we have here, as I'm going as quick as I can, but we're running low on time. Anything that we get, Q&A, anything that is sent to us that isn't addressed on this call will also be posted to the site. So if you send questions that we don't get to address on the meeting, or if you send us questions after the meeting, we will try to get those answered and posted to the site. This site is intended to be temporary because we will be preempted by RailLink. Once they go live, they're going to have more material. They're going to have the actual manuals for the system, some of the other rules, everything else, and then we're going to pass along the Q&A that we had, anything that is useful, and they would, they would have the freedom to add it to their Q&A page as well. So feel free to ask some questions, and then, like I say, anything we don't get to right now, we will get to is through the site. Question and answer. We'll open it up for a few minutes. I don't know if we've got much coming in, Chris.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Matt. All right. We'll go in the order we received, and hopefully we can get to most of them. All right. Will shippers / car owners need to enter their entire fleet into OT-57 in February 2020?
Yes. In fact, they'll need to do it by February 3rd. That date, again, subject to change, but yes, they will have to have everything in there by that time. You'll have about a month to do it because this should be up by January 1st. And also, as mentioned kind of there at the end, you can do a very simple one by setting up a default fleet and then cleaning up later if you're worried about timing. But yes, you do need to have it in by then.
All right. Will any adjustments need to be made if the cars are remarked at some point? Or will the new marks automatically be updated in OT-57 once they are updated in UMLR?
That's a great question. As it stands right now, the cars are linking to UMLR. So I'm actually looking for some clarification on this, but I believe that the cars will automatically be picked up. If I put in as ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's restenciled to ABCD 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that change should automatically be picked up and it will be in the fleet. I will get confirmation on that though, and when we post the question on the site, I'll lock in that yes, I did get verification that that's accurate.
Great. In the last OT-5 application, there was an entry for each storage location to have a number of cars able to be stored. Is that something that will be required in OT-57? Okay,
big round of applause here. No. Capacity is not a concern. This isn't about making sure that your entire fleet has a place to be dropped. This is about addressing a car or handful of cars that are placed where they shouldn't be and getting them out of the way. So no, capacity is not an issue.
Great.
Really great.
Do you recommend, and I know you did cover this, but maybe you just want to reiterate, do you recommend that we put all rail cars used at one plant into one fleet?
Most likely. The determining factor here is going to be who do you want to have contacted. If I have a plant that produces multiple things, I might not want the same point of contact for all of those. However, in general, that probably is easiest. It's going to come down to where are the cars going, right? So my storage facility, if I have storage capabilities at my plant can be the storage facility. But if they're going different directions across the country, I might want to specify different secondary storage locations. So the short answer is yes, that's certainly an easy way to do it. But situationally, you're going to want to look at who will you actually want to get the email or phone call.
Great. We do have a few more here, and we have a few more minutes. So,
I'm sorry. One more quick thing that I don't know that I addressed adequately, and that is part of the phase 2 is going to be to automate the communication that I was talking about there with that timeline. So when the railroad reaches out and says, "Hey, we need constructive placement for this," I kind of said day 0, day 1, day 2, et cetera. That's going to be maintained through a system. So something really nice here. It's not going to be a matter of, "Hey, I gave you a call on this day," and some nebulous paper trail. It's going to be documented in the system, and the system is going to say, we sent an email to this contact on this day, and then it automatically contacted the car owner on day 2, that kind of thing. So it's all going to be very nicely auditable. But that's great for everyone, just in terms of having except for the person not paying attention to what they're supposed to be doing. Might not be great for them. So go on.
Great. Will railroads still be charging OT-5 non-compliance fees through their tariff?
So first of all, no. OT-5 in this regard goes away. Now, the thing to be really clear about is that the charges the railroads are doing there is a commercial decision, not a regulatory decision. It is not foreseen that there's any real opportunity for this to become something that can be penalized. What's going to happen is if the railroads can't first of all, this is still loading authority. So the railroads very well might say, we're not going to pick up your car if you don't have loading authority filed, hence what they need to get this in by February 3rd. Now, in terms of penalization for noncompliance with it, that's a little bit different. What's going to happen is the railroads are going to come out and say, hey, we've got this car, we don't know where it's going to go. If you're the controlling entity and you don't respond and you haven't set up a profile and there's no storage facility, that railroad's going to drop it wherever they want, and you're going to be subject to all kinds of charges and penalties there, which has always been the case. So it's in your best interest to comply, but it's not foreseen right now that there would be any opportunity for this to become a commercial endeavor.
Great. All right. There are quite a few more questions. I'll try to get as many.
Let's do like 2 more because we're touching on 3 o'clock, and then I just want to kind of close out with a few comments. So.
Okay. Let's go to. How do we access findus.rail to enter our contact info?
Great question. Okay. First of all, you will be able to see this in the document that's posted. Here, really, really quick, let me just bring that up. here, this is the letter, a little bit zoomed in. I'm not going to leave this up for very long, but this is on our site. This is the letter Railink set up, and this does give some information on how to do that. Findus.rail is part of railink.com. You have to log in there. The question kind of gets bigger from there, but the short answer is you need to go to railink.com to do it. This document's available. If you have further questions, if you look at this document and start with questions, you can reach out to us or also to Railink. So depending on where your question is going, we might direct you either way. But feel free to ask us if you've looked at this and start with a question on it.
All right, one more question, and we will answer the rest of these questions on our website.
Yeah, if you submit a question, it will get answered. We'll put it on the site.
All right, last one for right now. Who is responsible for OT-57 compliance? The shipper lessee or the lessor owner?
The controlling entity is responsible, and they are typically the shipper. So the one responsible for moving the car around, which really the question is going to be to say, who is the railroad supposed to contact if there's a problem? Now, if you're an agent like all Transtech, we might be the ones responsible for doing it because we're contracted to do it, but we're doing it because it's the shipper's responsibility, and the shipper may or may not be the owner. It should also be noted that the owner will be identifiable as the mark owner of the car through Find Us, even if they aren't associated with the fleet. So if there is no OT-57, or if there are problems with OT-57, the railroad will be able to tag the mark owner through the process as well.
Great.
Okay, great. As mentioned, we will get the rest of the questions. I apologize. I had a lot of material. I'll try to get it through as quick as I could here. I want to do a system demo. Time is not permitting. Some closing comments. One of the big things is, first of all, I really want to thank everyone for their time. This is a big thing. I'm very, very excited about this. I am extremely happy about how this has gone down. A lot of times, the shipper-railroad relationship can go back and forth, and especially when there's problems. And OT-5 has been a problem. OT-57 has been beautiful. This relationship has been great. The railroads have been great to work with. The AAR has been great. The NAFCA and the representatives there on behalf of several shippers have just, everyone has been very civil, a lot of really good sharing of opinions and ideas, and I think this is a great solution that still will have to be adhered to, but it's much easier. This is a much better world than what we've been in with OT-5, so very excited about it. Lastly, another thing I want to do is in about an hour, the people on this meeting are going to get an invitation to submit a survey. So, be lenient. I know I went fast. Some of this was kind of small, but hopefully this was worth your while. Hopefully there was some good stuff here. Hopefully the website provides some good content. But anything you have that's constructive, we would love to hear. If you're saying, hey, you could do this or that differently, I'd love to hear it. Also, we're going to do a drawing. So when you submit the surveys, at the end of the day this Friday, we're going to pull one of the names, and someone's going to get an All Transtech shirt. And if you put really complimentary stuff in it, I'll autograph it for you. No, I'm just kidding. So let's see. That said, that's it. We're just about hit it, 3:03. Again, thank you all for your time. If you have questions even after this meeting, go ahead and send them in to us, and we'll get them on our site. We'll get you answers directly. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.